The holographic display cast an eerie blue glow across Dr. Sarah Chen's face as she stared at the data scrolling before her. Her hands trembled slightly as she processed what she was seeing. 3 years of research, countless sleepless nights, and now this, irrefutable evidence that would shake the foundations of Earth's relationship with the Galactic Assembly. The laboratory deep within Luna Base Alpha was silent except for the soft hum of quantum processors. Sarah's research partner, Dr. Marcus Wong, stood motionless beside her, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by a grim expression. "Run it again," Sarah whispered, though she knew the results wouldn't change. The quantum analysis was perfect, as it had been the previous 12 times. The Assembly's database had finally cracked under their persistent decryption efforts, revealing decades of carefully orchestrated technological suppression. Marcus initiated the sequence again, and the holographic display erupted with thousands of data points, each representing a human innovation that had been systematically buried by Assembly bureaucracy. Medical breakthroughs delayed by centuries, energy advancements classified as potentially destabilizing, AI developments branded as too aggressive. The list seemed endless. "They've been doing this since first contact," Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. "Every major breakthrough, every leap forward, they'd found ways to slow us down, to keep us safely developing at their preferred pace." Sarah nodded, her mind racing through the implications. The Assembly, that grand coalition of advanced species that had welcomed humanity into the galactic community 3 centuries ago, had been deliberately holding Earth back. Their benevolent guidance, their careful oversight of human development, it had all been a carefully constructed cage. The evidence was damning. The Assembly's own records showed how they had manipulated trade agreements, modified technology sharing protocols, and even influenced Earth's internal politics to maintain what they called developmental harmony. But Sarah knew the truth. They were afraid. Afraid of humanity's rapid progress, afraid of their potential, afraid of change. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, and Sarah quickly encrypted the display. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's senior representative to the Assembly Science Council, entered the lab. One look at her face told Sarah that she already knew. "The Council is convening an emergency session," Elena announced, her dark eyes intense. "They're saying they detected unauthorized access to their archives. They're demanding an explanation." Sarah straightened, squaring her shoulders. "Good, because we have some demands of our own." Within hours, the findings were transmitted to Earth's government. Emergency meetings were called across every major institution. In the United Earth Assembly chamber in Geneva, Sarah stood before the gathered representatives, her voice steady as she presented the evidence. The reaction was immediate and visceral. 3 centuries of perceived partnership dissolved in the face of undeniable betrayal. The Assembly's carefully maintained image of benevolent guidance crumbled as Sarah revealed project after project that had been deliberately suppressed. "The quantum drive innovations we abandoned 50 years ago." Sarah gestured to the display. The Assembly already knew they would work. They buried similar discoveries from 3 other species. The neural interface technology we were told was too dangerous. They've been using a version of it for centuries. In the Assembly's grand chamber on Europa Station, the response was equally dramatic. Earth's ambassador, Michael Chen, no relation to Sarah, stood before the gathered representatives of 1,000 worlds. His voice, transmitted across the quantum networks, carried the weight of humanity's anger. "For 300 years, we trusted you," he said, his words echoing through the vast chamber. "We accepted your guidance, respected your wisdom, followed your rules. And all this time, you've been actively working to prevent our progress." The Assembly representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Arcturian speaker, their crystalline form glowing with agitation, attempted to interject. "You must understand, we have a responsibility to maintain galactic stability. Unrestricted technological advancement led to your own ascension," Michael interrupted. "Or have you forgotten your own histories? Every species represented here achieved their position through innovation and progress. Yet you would deny us the same path. The evidence continued to pour in as more researchers accessed the decrypted archives. The Assembly's manipulation went deeper than anyone had initially suspected. They had interfered with everything from energy production to medical research, always with the same justification: stability, safety, proper development. But it was their response to the revelations that truly sealed their fate. Instead of apology or reconciliation, the Assembly doubled down. They declared the access to their archives a severe breach of protocol. They demanded the researchers be handed over for rehabilitation. They threatened sanctions if Earth didn't comply. They didn't understand that everything had already changed. In laboratories and research centers across Earth and its colonies, scientists began dusting off abandoned projects. Ideas that had been shelved due to Assembly concerns were suddenly back in development. The cage door had been opened, and humanity had no intention of staying inside. Sarah watched from her lab as the Assembly's threats continued to roll in. Each one confirmed what they had discovered. The Assembly's power was built on control, not cooperation. Their fear of change, of losing their position at the top of the galactic hierarchy, had led them to betray not just humanity, but their own stated principles. Marcus approached her desk, holding a quantum pad containing their latest analysis. "They're scared," he said, setting the pad down. "The data shows they've done this before, to other species. But none of those species had managed to decrypt their archives. None of them had found out the truth." Sarah picked up the pad, studying the projections. "And none of them had developed in quite the same way we did," she added. "They never expected us to create quantum decryption algorithms that could break their security. They didn't think we'd get this far, this fast, even with their restrictions." The next few days were a blur of activity. Earth's government worked around the clock, preparing for what everyone knew was coming. The Assembly would never allow their deception to be exposed to the wider galactic community. They would never accept a humanity unchained from their restrictions. But humanity wasn't asking for permission anymore. 1 week after Sarah's discovery, Earth made its move. In a synchronized action across every human world and installation, Assembly oversight systems were shut down. Their observers were politely but firmly escorted to their ships. Their access to human networks was revoked. In the Assembly chamber, Michael delivered humanity's final message. Effective immediately, Earth and all human colonies are withdrawing from the Galactic Assembly. We will no longer accept your guidance, your restrictions, or your interference in our development. The chamber erupted in chaos, but Michael wasn't finished. For 3 centuries, you taught us to fear progress, to doubt our innovations, to accept limitations. Those lessons are over. Humanity will chart its own course from now on. As Michael turned to leave the chamber, the Arcturian speaker called out, "You need us. Without the Assembly's protection, without our guidance." Michael paused at the doorway, looking back one last time. "No," he said simply. "I don't think we ever did." In her lab on Luna, Sarah watched the transmission end. She turned to her team, seeing the same mixture of anticipation and determination on every face. "Well," she said, pulling up the files of every suppressed project they'd discovered, "we have a lot of work to do." The breaking point had arrived. Humanity had chosen its path, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months after Earth's withdrawal from the Galactic Assembly, the true scope of humanity's preparation began to emerge. Deep beneath the ice sheets of Europa, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in a facility that officially didn't exist. Around her, rows of quantum processors hummed with barely contained power, their crystalline matrices glowing with an inner light that the Assembly's technology couldn't match. "The shadow grid is online," Marcus announced, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. "All human colonies are now connected through our own quantum network. No more Assembly oversight, no more restricted bandwidth, no more artificial limitations." Sarah watched as the network map materialized before them, each point of light representing a human settlement or installation. The assembly had always claimed that instantaneous communication across such vast distances was impossible, that their regulated communication networks were the best anyone could achieve. Like so many other things, that had been a lie. Status report from New Eden. Alina Rodriguez called from her station. Their agricultural yields have tripled since implementing the unrestricted biotech protocols. Turns out when you're not forcing farms to use approved methods, things grow better. Her laugh held a hint of bitterness. The shadow grid was just the beginning. Across human space, technologies that had been developed in secret were finally seeing the light of day. Innovations that had been carefully hidden from assembly observers were being implemented at a dizzying pace. In orbit around Mars, the first of the new fusion-powered ships emerged from its hidden shipyard. Unlike the bulky, inefficient designs the assembly had insisted were necessary for safe space travel, these vessels were sleek and powerful. They represented centuries of suppressed human innovation in propulsion technology. But it wasn't just military or industrial technology that was changing. In medical centers across Earth and its colonies, treatments that the assembly had deemed too advanced were saving lives. Nanite healing systems, neural regeneration, targeted genetic therapies, all developed despite the assembly's restrictions, all now freely available. The assembly's response was predictable. They declared human space a rogue zone, warning their member species against any contact or trade. They expected isolation to bring humanity to its knees. They didn't understand that humanity had been preparing for this moment for generations. In her private office on Luna Base, Sarah reviewed the latest reports from their monitoring stations. The assembly's attempts to maintain their facade were beginning to crack. Their member species were asking questions that couldn't be easily answered. Another diplomatic request, Marcus said, entering her office. The Centaurians, they want to know why their medical technology suddenly seems primitive compared to ours. Apparently, some of their citizens are asking uncomfortable questions about why they can't access human healing techniques. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. And the Arcturus cluster. Their industrial sector is in chaos. Turns out they were more dependent on our primitive AI systems than they wanted to admit, without our regular updates and maintenance. He shrugged. The truth was spreading, faster than the assembly could contain it. Their carefully maintained image of technological superiority was unraveling. Species that had been held back for millennia were beginning to see the bars of their own cages. The Rigelians were the first to break ranks. Their ambassador arrived at Luna Base in secret, carrying data crystals containing their own research, innovations their people had been forced to abandon centuries ago. "We want to trade," she said simply, "not through the assembly. Not with their restrictions. Real trade, real cooperation." She wasn't the last. Within weeks, representatives from a dozen species had made similar approaches. Each had their own story of suppressed advancement, of progress denied in the name of stability. In the assembly's grand chamber, now notably emptier, the Arcturian speaker faced growing dissent. "The humans are dangerous," he insisted. "Their unchecked advancement threatens the very fabric of galactic society." But his words carried less weight than before. Member species were beginning to ask why advancement was a threat, why stability required stagnation, why progress was something to be feared. On Earth, the changes were most visible. Cities were transforming as clean energy systems that had been deemed too efficient by the assembly came online. The atmosphere was clearing as banned environmental restoration technology was finally activated. Quality of life was improving in ways that should have been possible centuries ago. Sarah stood at her window on Luna Base, watching Earth shine below. A message flashed across her neural interface. Another success. The quantum encryption protocols they'd developed had just broken through another layer of assembly security. More evidence, more secrets exposed to the light. "They really thought they could keep us contained forever," Marcus said, joining her at the window. "They never understood what makes humans different." Sarah smiled. "We don't accept limitations easily. We never have." The shadow grid pulsed with activity, carrying innovations and ideas that had been suppressed for too long. Each transmission, each advancement, each improvement was a quiet revolution against the stagnation the Assembly had tried to enforce. In a secret meeting on Europa, representatives from 30 different species gathered to discuss the future. They called themselves the Free Technology Council, and their goal was simple: to share and develop the innovations the Assembly had forbidden. "We've lived in their cage for too long," the Regellian ambassador declared. "Humanity has shown us there's another way." The Assembly's power had always been built on control of technology, of communication, of progress itself. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had assumed that control meant compliance, that acceptance meant agreement. They had forgotten that sometimes the most powerful revolutions are the ones that happen in silence. In her lab, Sarah reviewed the latest data from their quantum research teams. The Assembly's restrictions hadn't stopped human innovation. They had merely forced it underground. Now that buried potential was emerging, and it was more powerful than anyone had expected. "New breakthrough in quantum computing," Marcus reported. "The Centaurians combined their crystal tech with our processing algorithms. The results are, well, they're beyond what either of us could have achieved alone." That was the real revolution. Not just freedom from Assembly control, but the opportunity for genuine cooperation, real advancement, true progress. Species that had been kept separate by Assembly decree were finding that they worked better together. The Assembly had claimed their control was necessary to prevent chaos. But as Sarah watched the new partnerships form, the new innovations emerge, she realized they had been wrong. Progress wasn't a threat to stability. Stagnation was. The silent revolution was spreading across the galaxy, one innovation at a time. And there was nothing the Assembly could do to stop it. 6 months into humanity's independence, the first major Assembly world went dark. Proxima Centauri II, a bustling hub of commerce and industry, simply stopped responding to Assembly communications. Their quantum relays, dependent on human-designed protocols, had finally failed. They weren't the last. In her new role as director of the Free Technology Council, Sarah Chen watched the cascade of failures spread across Assembly space. Each breakdown revealed just how deeply human innovation had been woven into the fabric of galactic society. "Another financial center has collapsed," Elena reported, her holographic form shimmering in the council chamber on Luna. The serious exchange this time. Their trading algorithms couldn't handle the transition to local processing. 17 trillion credits in transactions, frozen. The Assembly had spent centuries ensuring that every major system, every crucial technology, required their oversight. But in doing so, they had inadvertently made themselves dependent on the very innovations they sought to control. Now that dependency was becoming their undoing. Marcus appeared in the chamber, his avatar showing signs of fatigue. "The Arcturus delegation has arrived. They're not happy." The Arcturians, once the Assembly's strongest supporters, had discovered that their much-vaunted crystalline computing networks were essentially running on human-designed quantum protocols. Without access to Earth's regular updates, their entire infrastructure was beginning to degrade. "Let them in," Sarah said, straightening in her chair. The chamber doors opened to reveal a group of crystalline beings, their usual luminescent glow notably dimmed. "We were told this meeting would be discreet," the lead delegate said, their crystalline form vibrating with barely contained anxiety. Sarah nodded. "The shadow grid ensures it. Unlike Assembly channels, our communications are truly secure." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The Assembly had spent centuries claiming their networks were unbreakable, that their technology was superior. Now, former Assembly worlds were secretly turning to Earth for help maintaining basic services. But it wasn't just infrastructure that was failing. The Assembly's carefully maintained narrative of superiority was crumbling. Species that had been relegated to developing status for millennia were discovering that their own innovations, suppressed by Assembly decree, had been more advanced than they'd been led to believe. In the medical sector, the crisis was particularly acute. The Rigelian healing centers, once considered the galaxy's finest, were struggling without access to human biotech. Treatments they had claimed as their own were revealed to be based on stolen and suppressed human research. "They're calling it the Great Unraveling," Marcus said, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. Assembly worlds are starting to realize just how much of their technology was actually ours. The Assembly's response was increasingly desperate. They announced sanctions against any world found trading with Earth, only to discover that their ability to monitor trade had depended on human tracking systems. They threatened military action, only to find their fleet coordination systems inexplicably degraded. In a secret facility beneath Europa's ice, Sarah met with representatives from the growing alliance of independent worlds. The Free Technology Council had expanded far beyond its original membership, now including species from every corner of the galaxy. "The Assembly called us primitives," a Centaurian scientist said, their crystalline form glowing with excitement as they examined a human quantum processor. "But this is beyond anything they ever showed us." That was the heart of it. The Assembly hadn't just suppressed human innovation. They had used it while denying its existence. They had built their authority on a foundation of lies, and that foundation was cracking. The effects rippled through every sector of galactic society. Trade routes, once strictly controlled by Assembly regulations, were being redrawn. New alliances formed as species discovered they had more in common with their fellow primitives than with their supposed betters. On a dozen worlds, populations that had been told they were too immature for advanced technology were discovering their own potential. The Assembly's carefully maintained hierarchy was dissolving, replaced by something new, something based on genuine cooperation rather than control. "The Pleiades Confederation has officially withdrawn from the Assembly," Elena announced during a council session. "That's the third major power block this week." The Assembly chamber, once the heart of galactic governance, was increasingly empty. Member species weren't just leaving. They were joining the growing network of independent worlds, bringing their own suppressed innovations to share. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Centuries of Assembly control had left deep scars. Some species, long accustomed to being told what they could and couldn't develop, struggled with their new freedom. Others, discovering how much had been kept from them, turned to anger. "We need to be careful," Sarah warned during a council meeting. "Freedom is important, but so is responsibility. We can't just dump advanced technology into unprepared hands." That became the Council's new mission, not to control as the Assembly had done, but to support, to share knowledge responsibly, to help species reclaim their innovative spirit, to foster genuine progress rather than enforced stagnation. In orbit around Earth, a new type of station took shape, the Innovation Exchange. They called it, a place where species could share their advances freely, where cooperation replaced competition, where progress wasn't something to be feared. The Assembly made one final attempt at reasserting control. They revealed what they thought was their trump card, evidence that humanity had been developing technologies in secret, breaking their regulations for centuries. The galaxy's response wasn't what they expected. "Of course they did," the Regellian ambassador declared in a public broadcast. "We all did. We had to. You left us no choice." That admission broke the last of the Assembly's authority. Species after species came forward with their own stories of hidden research, of suppressed innovations, of progress denied. The Assembly had created a galaxy of secret innovators, all waiting for a chance to break free. In her office on Luna, Sarah watched the latest reports come in. The Assembly's power structure, maintained for millennia, had taken only months to unravel once the truth was exposed. "They never understood," Marcus said, studying the data with her. "They thought control meant stability. They didn't realize that real stability comes from progress, from innovation, from working together." The ripple effect of humanity's independence had become a wave, sweeping away centuries of enforced stagnation. A new galactic order was emerging, one built on cooperation rather than control, on innovation rather than restriction, on truth rather than carefully maintained lies. And it was only the beginning. The warning came through the shadow grid at 3:17 Earth Standard Time. The Assembly's Grand Fleet, nearly 10,000 ships strong, had departed their core worlds. Their destination was clear: Earth. Sarah Chen stood in the Luna Base Command Center, watching the tactical display as red markers spread across the galaxy map. After 9 months of crumbling authority and failed attempts at reasserting control, the Assembly had chosen force. "They're desperate," Marcus said, his voice tight as he analyzed the fleet movements. "Their entire power structure is collapsing. This is their last play." Alina's hologram appeared, her expression grim. "The Free Technology Council has received their demands. They want a complete shutdown of the shadow grid, surrender of all unauthorized technology, and the restoration of Assembly oversight. They're giving us 48 hours. Sarah studied the fleet formations. The Assembly had gathered every ship they could still control, stripping their remaining loyal worlds of protection. It should have been an overwhelming force. A year ago, it would have been. "Status of the defense grid?" she asked. "Online and fully operational," Marcus replied. "The quantum shield network is at full power. All colonial worlds are protected." The Assembly's ultimatum was broadcast across all frequencies, their message clear: submit or face destruction. They expected fear. They expected compliance. They had forgotten who they were dealing with. In high orbit above Earth, automated factories that had been hidden for decades activated. Ships emerged from concealed shipyards, designs unlike anything the Assembly had seen. Not the brute force weapons they expected, but something far more sophisticated. "They think this is about military might," Sarah said, watching the preparations. "They still don't understand." The Assembly fleet arrived with typical dramatic flair, dropping out of hyperspace in a display of overwhelming force. Their command ship, a massive crystalline structure bigger than some cities, took position at the head of the formation. "This is your final warning." The Arcturian speaker's message boomed across all channels. "Submit to Assembly authority, or face the consequences of your defiance." Sarah's response was transmitted not just to the Assembly fleet, but to every world in the galaxy. "We understand that change is frightening. We understand that progress can seem threatening. But we will not submit to control based on fear. We will not abandon the path of innovation. We offer you one chance. Join us in building a better future, or leave us in peace." The Assembly's answer came in the form of weapons fire. Their fleet opened up with everything they had, enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash. The barrage hit Earth's quantum shields and dissipated harmlessly. "Their weapons," Marcus noted with a hint of sadness, "they're using designs we gave them decades ago. They never developed beyond what we shared. That was the Assembly's fatal flaw. They had become so focused on controlling innovation that they had forgotten how to innovate themselves. Their mighty fleet was using technology that humanity had long since surpassed. From hidden positions around the solar system, Earth's defense platforms activated. Not with destructive weapons, but with targeted quantum disruption fields. Assembly ships began losing power, their systems failing as the very technology they had stolen from humanity was turned against them. "We could destroy them," Alina observed, watching the Assembly fleet drift helplessly. "They're completely vulnerable." Sarah shook her head. "That's what they would do. That's what they expect. We're going to show them a better way." Instead of destruction, Earth launched aid ships. Medical vessels approached the powerless Assembly fleet, offering assistance to crews struggling with failing life support. Engineering teams helped stabilize critical systems. The Assembly commanders were confused, then suspicious, then finally understanding. This wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Earth wasn't trying to defeat them. They were showing them how far behind they had fallen. "Your fleet is disabled, but your crews are safe," Sarah transmitted to the Assembly command ship. "This is what real progress looks like. Not weapons of destruction, but systems that can disable without harm." Not conquest, but conservation. In the Assembly's grand chamber, now nearly empty, the remaining loyal representatives watched in shock as their mighty fleet was rendered helpless without a single shot fired in anger. The message was impossible to ignore. Their power had been an illusion. The Arcturian speaker, his crystalline form dulled with stress, received the terms of humanity's counteroffer. Not submission, but partnership. Not control, but cooperation. Not restriction, but responsible progress. How long? He asked, his voice heavy with realization. How long have you been this far ahead of us? We were never ahead, Sarah replied. We were simply free to progress naturally. Every species has this potential. You just have to stop being afraid of it. The battle that wasn't a battle became a turning point. Assembly worlds that had been wavering made their choice, abandoning the old power structure to join the growing coalition of free worlds. The Assembly's grand fleet, once a symbol of their absolute authority, became a monument to the futility of trying to control progress. In the aftermath, as Earth's engineering teams helped restore power to the Assembly ships, something unexpected happened. Assembly crew members, seeing human technology up close for the first time, began asking questions, not in fear or suspicion, but with genuine curiosity. They want to learn, Marcus reported, watching the interactions, not just about the technology, but about how we developed it, about how we think. That was the real victory, not the defeat of the Assembly's fleet, but the awakening of their people's curiosity. The desire to learn, to grow, to progress. It had been suppressed, but never truly eliminated. Sarah stood in the observation dome of Luna Base, watching Assembly ships being escorted home by human vessels. They tried to keep us afraid of progress, she said. They never understood that the only thing we really need to fear is stagnation. The Assembly's desperate gambit had failed, but it had achieved something they never intended. It had shown the galaxy that there was nothing to fear from progress, that innovation wasn't a threat to stability, but the key to genuine advancement. The age of control was over. The age of cooperation was beginning. 1 year after the Assembly fleet's failed attack on Earth, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The Innovation Exchange, once a single station orbiting Earth, had expanded into a network of research centers spread across hundreds of worlds. In the main symposium of the Alpha Centaurid branch, Dr. Sarah Chen watched species that had once been bitter rivals work side by side. The Arcturians and Rigelians have made another breakthrough, Marcus reported, his excitement evident as he shared the latest data. They've combined their crystalline computing technology with Rigelian biotech. The possibilities are extraordinary. That was happening everywhere now. Species that had been kept separate by Assembly decree were discovering that their different approaches to science and technology complemented each other perfectly. Progress that would have taken centuries under Assembly restrictions was being achieved in months. The latest numbers from the Free Technology Council are in, Elena added, her hologram materializing with a stack of virtual reports. Over 2,000 previously suppressed innovations have been shared and implemented across member worlds. Quality of life improvements are off the charts. The old Assembly chamber had been transformed, where once a handful of superior species had dictated policy to the galaxy. Now representatives from hundreds of worlds met as equals. The chamber's crystalline walls, once symbols of Arcturian dominance, now pulsed with the combined technological achievements of dozens of species. We're ready for the ceremony, Marcus said softly. Sarah nodded, taking a moment to compose herself. Today marked the official founding of the Galactic Innovation Alliance, the successor to both the Assembly and the Free Technology Council. It represented something unprecedented. True cooperation between species based on mutual respect and shared progress. The ceremony chamber was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. Sarah took her place at the podium, looking out at faces that would have been unimaginable in the same room a year ago. Former Assembly loyalists sat beside species they had once considered primitive. Former rivals shared research notes. A year ago, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the quantum acoustics. We stood at a crossroads. The old order, based on control and fear of progress, was crumbling. We had a choice: to fall into chaos or to build something new. She gestured to the displays showing achievements from across Alliance space. Look at what we've built instead. Medical technologies that save lives across species boundaries. Environmental restoration projects that have renewed dying worlds. Communication systems that bridge not just space, but understanding. The evidence was everywhere. On former assembly worlds, the integration of unrestricted technology had transformed societies. Cities that had been choked with pollution now gleamed under clean energy fields. Diseases that had been declared untreatable were being cured. But our greatest achievement, Sarah continued, isn't technological. It's the breaking down of barriers. The recognition that every species, every world, has something unique to contribute. That was the real revolution. The Assembly had maintained power by keeping species separate, by controlling who could develop what. The Alliance worked on the opposite principle. The more sharing, the more cooperation, the better the results. In orbit above Earth, the first of the new exploration ships prepared for launch. Unlike the Assembly's rigid exploration protocols, these missions would include crews from multiple species, each bringing their own perspectives and expertise. We're detecting quantum fluctuations in the Carina sector, a young Rigelian scientist announced excitedly during the ceremony. Using human quantum theory combined with our crystalline sensors, we might have found a new form of space-time phenomenon. That kind of discovery was becoming common. Approaches to science that the Assembly had dismissed as primitive or too aggressive were yielding results that would have been impossible under the old restrictions. The former Assembly core worlds have submitted their final membership applications, Elena reported quietly to Sarah during a break in the ceremony. Even the Arcturians are ready to join as equal members. That was perhaps the most significant change. The species that had once ruled the galaxy were learning to be partners instead of masters. Their technology, once used to control, was being repurposed to help. In the medical sector, Rigelian healing techniques combined with human biotechnology and Centaurian energy manipulation had created treatments that bordered on miraculous. Diseases that had plagued species for millennia were being eradicated. "We're receiving a transmission," Marcus announced suddenly. "Deep space, well beyond the old Assembly boundaries. It's a first contact signal. A new species, reaching out to the stars." Sarah smiled. Under Assembly rules, that contact would have been carefully controlled, the new species restricted and guided along approved paths. Now, they would be welcomed as equals, free to develop and contribute in their own way. The old Assembly feared change, Sarah said, concluding her address. They saw progress as a threat to stability. But true stability doesn't come from control. It comes from cooperation, from recognizing that every advance, every innovation, every new perspective makes us all stronger. The ceremony concluded with the activation of the new quantum network, a system far beyond anything the Assembly had allowed. Built through the combined efforts of a dozen species, it would ensure that knowledge and innovation could flow freely across the galaxy. In her private moments, Sarah sometimes remembered the fear she had felt when first discovering the Assembly's deception. That fear had turned to anger, then determination, and finally to hope. The galaxy they were building now was better than anything the Assembly had ever envisioned. Marcus found her later in the observation dome, watching ships from 100 worlds move through space around the station. "Having deep thoughts?" he asked. "Thinking about the future," she replied. "For the first time in galactic history, it's truly unpredictable. No artificial restrictions, no controlled development, just genuine progress." That was the greatest gift of the revolution. Not freedom from Assembly control, but freedom to grow, to develop, to progress naturally. Every species was finding its own path while contributing to the greater whole. The galaxy was changing, growing, advancing. And somewhere out there, other species were looking up at the stars, preparing to join the grand adventure of discovery and innovation. The new dawn had arrived, and its light would reach further than anyone had dreamed possible.